Hey everybody! Today I'm going to show you guys how to do a very basic experimental field of flowers with palette knives. So palette knife painting is one of my favorite ways to paint. The tools, here are some examples of palette knives. There are so many, there are dozens of different shapes. Some of these have a bend right here between the handle and the actual surface that you paint with. And those that actually have a bend are called painting knives. And there are flat ones as well, like this, that are actually called palette knives. But we tend to call all of them palette knives. And really, you can paint with all of them. The palette knife, this was called a palette knife because it was designed to scrape your palette clean, to scrape paint off your palette in general. And these are called painting knives because with that bend there, when you paint, your knuckles don't get actually come in contact with the surface that you paint with, which we'll see. So the ones with the bend are actually the ones that I find easier to paint with. And the way that that works, we're gonna see. So I will get ready to go, and we have a small surface here. I'm gonna do a small palette knife painting for you guys today. And it's gonna be done fairly quickly for the video purposes, but this is something that you can take your time with. It's got just 3 basic steps or stages of creation. The first is gonna be to create a background. And option to do this next part with a brush, but I'm gonna I'm gonna be a purist here, and I'm gonna just do this completely with palette knives. So also our materials, we have a palette of paints, and what I've done here is I've just chosen the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, blue, some white, and a little tiny bit of black there. And because I really don't need a lot of black. And I've found that adding too much white or black to a color will flatten out the intensity. So it'll kind of dull it out a little bit. Next we have a jar of water. We have a rag here that I like to wipe my palette knives on. So I'll try to kind of capture that as I go. And then, of course, this right here is actually canvas paper. And if you zoom in, it's hard to see. There's little tiny teeth to it. So it's got a little bit of a texture to it. There it is. So I like to have a little bit of a texture like that to the surface that I'm painting with because it kind of acts like a real canvas. It grabs some of the paint. And so you can also do this on just any kind of really thick paper. You can even do this on cardboard if we're working with materials we need to find laying around at home. Palette knives, we may not all have them laying around, but guess what? You can actually use plasticware, knives, spoons, even forks for texture. You could even probably find something that was not at all designed for painting to use for painting. But palette knife painting. All right, here we go. I'm going to do what's called a field of flowers. It's just going to be a very basic landscape. Here is one that I created a while ago. And with this, I have a background. I have the green of leaves, the stems, and then I have the blossoms. Those are the 3 main parts. Also, I've changed the background color a few times, so option to decide you don't like what you've done and modify it and add a new color anytime along the way. I found that in palette knife painting, the more texture, the better. So I consider palette knife paintings that I do just kind of in progress. Rarely are they just absolutely finished forever. But you know, if you really love it, keep it as it is. All right, you guys ready? Let's do it. First, I'm going to take a knife that has a nice big surface, and I'm going to scrape some paint. So first I'm going to kind of blend a background, and I think I want some sort of sky color. I'm going to just kind of scoop some white and a little bit of blue, and I'm going to kind of blend them together. And then I'm going to start spreading. Sometimes paint will get on top of the knife. What you really want it to do is to be on the bottom. So I don't like to go like this because I feel like it doesn't really put the paint exactly where I want it. You're welcome to do that if you want. If you know you're just kind of covering a surface with color and you're not doing any detail, I feel like that's fine. This is a little dark, so I'm probably going to add some white and lighten this at some point. And what I do to clean, just like that. I don't really need to clean it in the water, but if you're using multiple knives and you're afraid you're going to let paint dry on them, you can just kind of lay it in there, you know. Just don't let it sit in the water too long if it's metal. It could rust. I've had it happen. All right, we're going to keep going. I'm going to add some white and just kind of blend, lighten it up a little. And I'm going to wipe it off again. I'm going to add more white. And then what I'm going to do, I am going to add a touch of yellow. So I'm just going to, and this knife is pretty big. I'm just using it to cover background. And I'm going to blend it up into the white a little bit, but not too far so it doesn't make green. And you can scrape it too if you get too much and just wipe it on the rag. So I'm going to do a touch more yellow. And a little white to lighten it up a bit because that's kind of intense. That's some intense yellow. And I actually like leaving the sort of chunks of color unblended. That texture, it's kind of hard to get used to if you've never palette knife painted before. It looks like you just must blend it in. But try leaving it, and it kind of comes up. It gives a really cool textured result. All right, so I've got a little red, and I mean a little. I might actually spread it out. I don't want a lot. And you know what else you can do? You can load your palette knife with a brush too sometimes. I'm going to add a little yellow in there so I don't make my palette super mixy. All right, I'm just going to kind of, let's see what happens. That's fun though. I kind of like that. So another trick of palette knife painting, and it's hard to really convey here, is that you don't want to scrape everything and press down everything. Have you ever iced like a cake or a cupcake or something, spread on some bread, like some peanut butter, something, and you did not want to rip the surface? You want to spread without pressing down. So it's sort of like a delicate spreading. Sometimes you can do that and you can actually get results where you're not like you're just leaving it partially blended. Experiment on just random surfaces and try it out. It takes practice. The first time I palette knife painted, everything got muddy and mixed and scraped, and I did not like a lot of the results. So I had to just keep playing with it without any judgment. You can use cheap paint for this. Although thicker paint, sometimes you get a better effect because you can leave that texture. So this is sort of some kind of surreal, fiery sunset here. And I've gone almost all the way down because I am going to do the green of the leaves of the flowers that I do. But I also, I want it to kind of cover over the background so that there's not empty spaces where I then have to come back from the top and paint around something. Because that's super frustrating. Although it is possible to do it, you can always do it. Sometimes you can actually get a cool result palette knifing like that too. So there are rules, but there are not rules, you know. Just the way I like it. All right, this is a start. So now I'm retiring this knife and I'm going to choose something else. How about, I'm going to choose this one, but I'm going to use the bottom of it to kind of print. So first I want to mix colors. So guess what? I'm going to use this one to mix. Can trade out the knives. So I'm going to take a little yellow, put it in a new spot. Take a tiny bit of blue. You don't need as much of the darker colors as you do of the lighter. And I'm making a weird green. So guess what? We're going to kind of mix a little white. Let's start with this and see what happens. All right, want to mix, get all of it off. Now, created a surface. You can have a bigger palette than this if you want, so that you can actually put knives in paint and a lot of different colors going at once with that. So I'm going to try, let's see. This might look a little bit strange. This is just the beginning. We're going to do a little more. I may migrate to a larger, flatter surface. All right. So I'm just printing now. I'm going to switch to a smaller knife where I get more detail in a moment. And I think, let's see, I might go in and just kind of scrape in some foreground at the bottom just to fill in that space. You can use green paint if you kind of like a brighter green. It's cool to use green paint. You don't have to mix everything. It doesn't have to be done with just the primaries. It's kind of a fun challenge though, because you can actually mix so many different versions of a color just by using the primaries plus white a little bit of the time, or just in different ratios. All right. Now we are gonna continue on. Let's see, I'm gonna use a smaller knife again. And I'm going to continue mixing more green. And to do that, we need more yellow. I like to print a little bit here. And we will make this have some more depth too as we go. I'm going to add a little white. Make sort of a pastel green. I'm actually adding some blue in here because I kind of like the bits of blue balancing out with the bits of blue in the sky, which I'm totally going to return to. We're giving a little bit of an abstract feel to this now. So the steps that I'm doing, feel free to choose any colors that you want. You do not, obviously this is just about the steps it takes to make a basic palette knife flower painting, which is one of the great first ways to explore palette knives, because we all kind of need some sort of prompt or idea, you know, to just play with palette knives sometimes can feel like, well, what do I do with that? So this is a good kind of first thing to try to create. And notice I didn't really put mine up halfway. I kind of like the composition as such, where there's more sky than ground. I just like that balance better. All right, so let's see. Now I'm going to kind of go in and do some blossoms. All right, and get myself a little more yellow. So I've got red, yellow, white, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to scoop some white to a new spot, scoop some yellow to a new spot, same place, and a little red. I'm going to mix them together. That red is pretty dominant, so which will happen if you got a nice dark color that you're mixing with lighter colors again. So I'm going to wipe this palette knife off. We're going to add some more yellow. And what I want is kind of an orangey red. There we go, that's pretty. See, if I mix it back and forth in one small spot, I don't have to create that huge circle. So, all right, first, now that I've got that color, I'm actually going to make another one. I'm going to have a variety of pinks and reds to choose from before I begin adding my flowers. So I've got this red, I've got this orangey color, and now I think I want to make a little bit of a darker one. I'm going to take some of this red over here. I'm going to pull in just a touch of black, just enough to make it sort of burgundy. Now I have a range of values, what we call values. And values are the lightness and darkness of a color. All right, so we have this dark color, this burgundy, this red, and this light. And that way we can make things look three-dimensional. So we want darker to kind of convey the idea of a shadow, medium tone to kind of just build on that, and then a highlight to kind of give an illusion of dimension. Here's the original one I showed you, and here you can see there's a dark value, there's sort of medium values, and then there's a light. And even though it's abstract, it gives you a sense of three-dimensionality, because there's always going to be a shadow somewhere in whatever you're looking at, and there's always going to be a highlight, even if it's really subtle. So now I'm going to start by putting some of the mid-tone on there. So I'm using a small knife because I'm using kind of a small surface here. And I'm just going to kind of use, you can use the tip of it. And I'm going to do a couple of, down here, big ones. And if the green is still wet, no biggie. Just pat it on, right? I'm going to do one big one down here. And what you want to do is you want to kind of keep in mind that the higher up you go on your canvas, the further away something is in the bottom here. So this is a way to like use the size of objects to show depth. So this is also called perspective. So you can use, I'm going to actually pick a different knife, one that I can use the tip of and have it bend a little more. This one, pretty good. So I'm using that mid-tone, and I'm going to do some medium ones, and then I'm going to do some little ones further up. Just want to have a range, right? And this is a little bit abstract, so you can have, you can do it differently, but I recommend you try like the larger ones more at the bottom, because then it'll look like things are getting further away as you go up. And just play, don't overthink it. You'll figure out what doesn't work, and that's just as valuable as figuring out what does. So now I've got that medium tone. Now I'm going to go in and do little highlights. Doesn't have to be in the middle. Doesn't have to be on all of them either. Now I'm going to wipe my brush off, or my knife, excuse me. It's like a brush. And then I'm going to take some of this dark one, and I'm going to just kind of add a touch of it around the edge. I'm not putting the dark where the light is. I'm just kind of putting it around the side of these blossoms. I'm just patting it on. you could end up using a lot of paint with this, and that's cool. You have it. And you can use, honestly, you can use kind of cheap paint for this and just use a lot of it. You can add, you can actually add things like sand to your paint to give it texture. Ripped up fine pieces of paper. There's a lot you can do with just with your paint. If you have like craft paint that's really liquidy, you can actually build texture in it. All right, so I've got some blossoms here that I actually really like. And I'm now gonna revisit my sky a little bit. And I'm gonna just take, let's see. I'm gonna take some of my colors here and add a little bit more to the sky. I think I'm gonna add some more white. You're gonna see this paint dries pretty quick. And I'm just gonna kind of add some of that texture in. It kind of looks like clouds. See how that works? It's pretty neat. And that is what happens when you scrape the knife on a surface that already has texture, that is dried a little bit. I'm gonna take a little more. That blue is kind of dark, so I'm lightening it up a little bit, but I'm not, you know, there'll be some of that, it'll still show through everything. And I like that better, yeah. Actually kind of lightening the blue. You could put some purple here if you wanted. Let's see. You can also add, I'm going to make a little tiny bit of purple and see what happens. Might just make it look a little weird, but hey, you can scrape it too. Look, I kind of like the way that looks, adding it and then scraping it back off. And take a little knife and some of that yellow, take it off. Get some cool effects just by scraping. And if this red is kind of competing with the red of the blossoms, I mean, I kind of like it though, but you could scrape that off too. So here's a very basic Field of Flowers palette knife painting. Also, I'm gonna come up here and show you guys some other palette knife experiments. Whew. So here's one that I did. Do you know what those scratches are? That's a fork. Pretty cool, huh? And then here's one that I just